Snow whispered across the open plain like a ghost dragging her dress. The wagon stood half buried in the drift, its single lantern flickering against the dark. Martha Ellison pressed her gloved hands to her husband's chest one last time, though the warmth had long left him. His eyes, once the color of clear corn liquor, were closed beneath a crust of ice. Her voice cracked as she whispered his name into the storm, but the wind carried it away without mercy. She had thought they would make it to town before nightfall. They were a day behind the storm, and then it caught them in the hills, two gray-haired settlers and a dying horse. Now only one heart still beat, and it trembled like the flame of that lonely lantern. Martha rose slowly, her knees stiff, her back aching from years of labor and cold mornings. She straightened his coat, brushed snow from his hair, and pressed her lips to his forehead. "Rest now, Henry," she murmured. "I'll find help." Her words felt absurd against the vast, empty white. The snow deepened as she walked, clutching her shawl close, the hem of her skirt soaked and heavy. She didn't know where she was going, only that she could not stay beside that wagon, staring at the man who had shared 40 winters with her. Somewhere in the valley, she'd seen smoke curling upward when the light had not yet faded. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant life. The world had narrowed to the sound of her boots breaking the crusted snow, and the rhythm of her breath. Her tears froze before they fell. She thought of the children long gone to other territories, of the letters unanswered, of how her reflection had become her mother's face years ago. "Old fool," she whispered to herself. "You should have stayed in the plains." Then, through the veil of snow, she saw it, a faint orange glow trembling in the distance. A cabin. Her pace quickened until she stumbled, nearly fell. Her legs screamed in protest, but she dragged herself forward, up the low rise where the smoke bled into the night sky. The cabin was rough-hewn, its door flanked by stacked wood and an axe half buried in frost. A man stood outside, swinging the axe into a fresh log. His arms, broad as a tree trunk, moved with slow precision. Even from afar, she could see the white in his hair, long and tied at the nape. His chest was bare despite the cold, his breath a mist that curled like smoke. Martha hesitated, gripping the doorframe. Her voice came out a rasp. "Sir." The axe fell one last time. The man straightened, turning toward her. The firelight from the cabin's window brushed across his face. Deep lines, sun-browned skin, eyes the color of dark soil. An Apache, she realized, though she had not seen one this far north in years. He said nothing, only studied her as snow gathered on her shawl. Then he stepped aside, pushing the door open. Inside, the warmth struck her like a memory. A small fire burned in the hearth. The scent of wood smoke and cooked venison filled the air. She removed her wet gloves with trembling fingers. "I lost my husband today," she said softly, her voice shaking. He's gone cold by the wagon." The man's gaze flickered once, then he crossed to a shelf and poured a tin cup of hot water. "Sit," he said, his voice low and rough with disuse. She obeyed, sinking into the chair near the fire. Her bones ached from the sudden warmth. He set the cup before her, then crouched by the fire to feed it another log. The movement made his muscles ripple beneath his skin, scarred and weathered by years that mirrored her own. He was older, perhaps 60, maybe more, but he carried himself like stone shaped by wind, not weakened by it. "You shouldn't be out alone," he said finally. "I'm not," she answered quietly. "Not anymore." He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "You can stay tonight." The words loosened something inside her chest. She hadn't realized how tight she'd been holding herself together, how close the tears waited. She set the cup down and covered her face with both hands. "I didn't know where else to go." He rose and hung a kettle over the flame. "The snow will bury the trail by morning," he said. "You will not be found till it ends." "That's fine," she murmured. "I've already been found enough." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, faint as smoke. He offered her a wool blanket, heavy and coarse, and she wrapped it around her shoulders. The firelight painted her white hair gold. He watched her, not with hunger or pity, but with the solemn curiosity of a man who rarely saw another living soul. For a time, there was only the pop of the fire and the sighing wind. Her eyelids grew heavy. She stared into the flames, seeing her husband's face there, young again, laughing by a riverbank in Missouri before the wars, before the graves. She whispered something no one would ever hear. When she woke, the fire had burned low, and the man was gone. Panic fluttered in her chest until she saw the shadow through the frosted window. He was outside, lifting something heavy into the snow. She rose, drew the blanket tighter, and opened the door. The wind hit her full in the face. The man was kneeling beside a mound of earth beneath the pine trees, his bare back dusted with snow. A crude wooden cross leaned in the soil. For a moment she didn't understand. Then she saw the outline of her husband's coat folded at the base. Her breath left her in a cry too soft for the storm. He turned at the sound, eyes calm. "Ground's soft there," he said. She couldn't speak. The snow was falling harder now, hiding the world in white silence. He stood, towering against the gray horizon, the firelight from the cabin flickering behind him. "Come inside," he said. "The storm will take the rest before dawn." Martha looked once more at the mound, then at him. Her heart broke and rebuilt itself in the same instant. She stepped forward, letting him guide her back to the cabin. Inside, he poured her another cup of water. She took it, hands shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. "Rest." As she sat again by the fire, she thought she heard him whisper something in his own tongue, a low prayer that curled with the smoke. She didn't understand the words, but she felt their warmth. Outside, the storm howled across the valley. Inside, two old souls sat by the same fire, each pretending not to need the other, yet both knowing, quietly, that something had shifted in the snow. Morning came pale and gray, the light thin as breath through the frost-streaked windows. Martha woke to the sound of a kettle hissing over the fire, and the scent of pine smoke. For a moment she forgot where she was, then the ache in her chest reminded her. Her husband lay beneath the hill now, under snow soft as ash. She drew the wool blanket closer around her shoulders, and watched the man at the hearth. Tahu moved quietly, his motions deliberate. He poured water into a tin cup and set it near her without looking up. His long hair was damp from melted snow, tied with a strip of leather. The muscles in his back shifted like coiled rope under bronze skin. He seemed carved from the same timber as his cabin, weathered, unyielding and solitary. "Morning," she whispered, her voice rough. He nodded once. "You slept." "I didn't mean to." "You needed to." She tried to smile but failed. The silence pressed close again, filled only by the creak of the logs and the wind sighing at the door. She wanted to thank him for burying Henry, but the words stuck like thorns in her throat. Instead she asked, "Did you say anything over him?" Tahu poked the fire with an iron rod. "Yes." "In your language?" He nodded. "Would you tell me what it meant?" He hesitated. "It means the ground remembers the names of the tired." Her eyes stung. She turned away, pretending to sip from the cup. The warmth burned her tongue, but she welcomed the pain. It was proof she still existed. Outside, the snow had slowed. Through the window she saw the faint outline of the burial mound beneath the pines, already half hidden. She thought of the years she had spent surviving beside a man she respected more than she loved, of the quiet mornings that stretched like winters themselves. She had never imagined her last act of marriage would be to ask a stranger to lay him in the earth. Tahu began cutting bread with a hunting knife. "You should eat," he said. She obeyed out of habit more than hunger. The bread was coarse, the venison salted. Each bite steadied her. "You live alone?" "Yes." "For long?" He shrugged. "Long enough. I suppose I'll move on after the storm." He didn't answer. She studied his face, the fine scars near his jaw, the faint white streak through his eyebrow. He had known battle, or loss, or both. Later, when she stepped outside to breathe, the cold caught in her throat like a warning. The valley was hushed, endless white. Smoke curled from the chimney in a thin line that faded into low clouds. She noticed boot prints leading up the slope, his from before dawn, and beside them, smaller tracks from a coyote or stray dog. The sight made her uneasy. She wasn't used to this wilderness of silence. When she returned inside, he was repairing a broken snare. She asked if he'd seen many travelers. Not for months, he said. She hesitated. Then I suppose I'll be the talk of the town if they find me here. He looked up, his eyes sharp but calm. Let them talk. They will, she said bitterly. They always do. He set the snare aside. Why care? Because it's all I've ever had, what people think of me. Tahu's mouth tightened, not in anger but in understanding. Then you have had little. Her cheeks flushed. I've worked for my name all my life. Names change, he said simply. Wind changes too. His words irritated and comforted her at once. She wanted to protest, to tell him that a woman without a reputation was like a door without a lock, but something in his tone silenced her. By afternoon the snow brightened, and she offered to help with chores. He didn't refuse. Together they gathered logs from the stack outside. She slipped once on the ice, and his hand caught her elbow. The touch startled her, the strength in it, the steadiness. For a second she thought she felt her heart move again. When they carried the last of the wood inside, he said, "You are strong." She laughed faintly. "Not like I used to be." "You are alive," he replied. She met his eyes then, dark, still, reflecting the firelight. "You sound sure of that." "I have seen death," he said. "You don't wear his face." The words unsettled her in a strange, quiet way. She busied herself sweeping the floor, though it was already clean. Every motion reminded her how foreign this place was. Rough timber, handmade tools, the scent of sage hanging from the rafters. Yet she felt safer here than she had in months. As evening fell, the wind picked up again. Tahu lit another lamp, the glow softening his features. He handed her a folded blanket. "You will sleep near the fire again." "I could take the cot," she offered. He shook his head. "It's cold near the wall." She watched him settle on the floor near the door, as if keeping guard. Guilt pricked at her. "You shouldn't give up your bed." "I don't sleep much," he said. She wanted to ask why but didn't. The air between them had thickened into something fragile. Trust or pity, she couldn't tell. Later, after she thought he'd drifted off, she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you." "I hear you," he murmured. She smiled into the blanket. The fire crackled softly. The next day dawned clearer, the world glistening under a pale sun. Martha decided she would bake something for him, a gesture of gratitude, of purpose. She found flour and lard in his pantry, and began mixing by the hearth. The smell of rising bread filled the cabin, mingling with smoke. Tahu returned from checking traps, his shoulders dusted with snow. He paused, sniffed the air. "Smells like a story," he said. "Just bread," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Same thing." They ate together in the hush of mid-morning. For the first time she laughed, soft and real. The sound startled them both. But peace in the frontier was never left untouched for long. Toward noon, the faint jingle of harness bells reached them from down the valley. Tahu stiffened, listening. Through the window, 2 riders appeared. Traders from town, wrapped in heavy coats. One pointed toward the cabin. Martha's stomach twisted. "They'll wonder what I'm doing here." He said nothing. When the men arrived, their eyes darted between her and Tahu. One of them, a gray-bearded man she half recognized from the mercantile, said, "Mrs. Ellison? Folks been looking for you. Thought you'd froze out there." His tone turned wary as he eyed Tahu. "Didn't figure you for company like this." Tahu stood silent, arms crossed. Martha's hands trembled as she clutched her shawl. "He helped me," she said firmly. "He buried my husband." The men exchanged a glance. "You best come back with us. People are talking." "I'm staying until the road clears," she said. "That's not wise," the other warned. "Town don't take kindly to." Tahu's voice cut through the cold. "She stays." The traders looked at him, then at her, uncertain. "You'll bring trouble on yourself," one muttered before turning his horse. The sound of their hooves faded into the distance. Martha stared after them, heart pounding. "They'll tell everyone." "Yes," Tahu said. Her throat tightened. "They'll say I've lost my mind." He added another log to the fire. Then lose it. Better than losing your life. She sank into the chair, shaking. You don't understand how cruel words can be. He glanced at her. I do. The simplicity of it silenced her again. The wind howled outside, carrying away whatever explanation she might have offered. As night fell, she sat by the fire, tracing the rim of her empty cup. Shame battled with gratitude inside her. She wondered if she should leave at first light, walk back through the snow, reclaim the version of herself the town would accept. But when she looked up, she saw Tahu by the window, his profile outlined in amber light, steady as the mountains behind him. And she realized, for the first time in years, that she wasn't afraid of being seen. The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the dark. She whispered, almost to herself, "They'll never forgive me." Tahu turned his head slightly, his voice quiet but sure. "Forgive yourself first." She opened her mouth to answer, but a sudden gust slammed the shutters wide, scattering embers across the floor. The wind howled through the cabin like a beast. He lunged to close them as she shielded the flame with her hands. When the storm subsided, smoke drifted toward the rafters. Outside, the snow began again, soft, relentless, erasing every track that led to the world she once knew. By the third morning, the storm had turned to silence. The world outside lay buried in white, the cabin half swallowed by drifts that glittered like powdered glass. Martha woke to the smell of smoke and pine, her fingers still warm from the blanket he'd placed around her in the night. Tahu stood by the window, motionless, watching the slow fall of snowflakes as if they were messages written by the wind. She rose quietly, smoothing her hair, though there was no mirror, no reason for vanity. The past 2 days had blurred into something dreamlike, grief dulled by firelight and silence. She didn't know what day it was anymore, only that she had slept without fear. The thought both comforted and frightened her. He turned when she approached. "Snow will hold till noon," he said. "Then melt some." "Does it ever stop for good?" she asked softly. "Not here." He handed her a small tin plate of cornbread, rough but warm. She thanked him and sat by the fire. Their quiet had grown companionable, the pauses full of meaning instead of emptiness. She had learned his rhythm, the way he answered only when words were needed, how his silences carried weight instead of neglect. Outside, the world gleamed, sharp and unwelcoming. Martha looked at her worn boots by the door, their edges stiff with ice. "If I go back to town," she said, "they won't see me the same." "They never did," he replied. She gave a tired laugh. "I suppose that's true." For a moment she watched the way the light caught in his hair, white as hers but stronger somehow, a color earned by time rather than surrendered to it. "You must have been handsome once," she said without thinking. His brow lifted. "Once? I mean," she stammered, smiling. "You still are, but—" He didn't let her finish. "Once, maybe. Long ago." His gaze drifted to the window, to the horizon beyond it. "Before the soldiers came." She hesitated. "You fought?" He nodded. "Then I buried the fighting. Built this place. No one came. Until me. Until you." The words lingered between them, soft but heavy. She looked down at her hands, at the faint tremor that had begun since her husband's death. "I didn't mean to bring trouble." He shrugged. "Trouble finds those who still breathe." The way he said it made her want to ask what he'd lost, but she knew some questions were sacred, meant to remain unspoken. Instead, she said, "You shouldn't have buried Henry alone. It wasn't your burden." "Burden shared is lighter," he said simply. She felt her throat tighten. "You didn't even know him." "I knew you were crying," he said. That was enough. Her heart stung. In her whole marriage, no man had said something so gentle with so few words. She rose abruptly, pacing near the door to hide her confusion. "They'll come back," she murmured. "The traitors. The sheriff. They'll think the worst." Tahu nodded. "Let them. They might hurt you. I have lived through worse." Martha turned toward him, her eyes fierce now. "I won't have blood spilled because of me." He met her gaze, calm and unflinching. "Then don't leave." If you stay, they will not come. You don't know these people. His voice dropped, quiet but sure. You don't know me. The wind outside rose again, whispering against the cabin walls like restless ghosts. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, heart hammering with emotions she couldn't name. The air felt charged, as if something unseen was watching. Hours passed before the knock came. 3 heavy raps that shook the wood. Martha froze. Tahu's face hardened. He opened the door slowly. Sheriff Doolan stood there, coat dusted with frost, 2 deputies behind him. His eyes went straight to Martha. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, voice too polite. "Folks are concerned. You vanished after your husband's passing. Then word reached us you're keeping company with." His eyes flicked toward Tahu. "This fella." Tahu said nothing, only stood still, his sighs filling the doorway like a mountain. Martha's pulse raced. "He saved my life," she said. The sheriff's mouth tightened. "That may be. But people talk. They think maybe you were taken. You understand how that looks." "I wasn't taken," she said firmly. "I stayed." Doolan shifted uncomfortably. "You're grieving, ma'am. Come back to town, rest proper. You can't stay out here alone with—" "With what?" she asked sharply. The sheriff's gaze flicked to Tahu again. "With him." Tahu's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Martha's anger burned through her grief. "You'd rather I froze to death than share a fire with a man who showed me kindness?" The sheriff sighed. "It ain't that simple." "It's exactly that simple." For a long moment, no one spoke. Snow hissed against the threshold. Finally, Doolan stepped back. "Suit yourself, Mrs. Ellison. But if trouble comes, don't say you weren't warned." He nodded to his men, and they left, boots crunching through the snow until their figures vanished into the storm. When the door closed, Martha sagged against it, trembling. "They'll never stop talking." Tahu placed a log in the fire, his voice steady. "Words can't break wood or bone." "No," she whispered. "But they can break a soul." He looked at her then, really looked, and something softened in his eyes. "Then let yours rest here. No one can reach it through the snow." She sank into the chair by the fire, covering her face. He turned away to tend the kettle, giving her the mercy of privacy. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of the quiet labor of 2 people mending what life had torn. As night deepened, the wind grew violent again, rattling the shutters. Tahu moved to secure the door. Martha watched him, his calm in the face of the storm, his unhurried strength. For the first time, she realized how much she trusted him. When he turned back, she said softly, "Do you ever wish the world would forget you?" "It already has," he replied. She stared into the fire. "Then maybe that's not such a curse." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe not." Lightning flashed outside, brief and ghostly, followed by a rumble that shook the walls. She startled. He crossed the room and steadied her shoulders. His hand lingered, the warmth of his palm grounding her. For a moment they stood like that, the distance between them smaller than a breath. The storm roared louder. A beam creaked overhead. Then, crack, the sound of splitting timber. Tahu shoved her aside just as part of the roof gave way. Snow and shards of wood fell into the cabin, snuffing part of the fire. She gasped as the cold rushed in. He held the beam with both hands, muscles straining. "Get back!" But she didn't move. She grabbed the broken pole beside her, bracing it under the sagging timber. Together they pushed, the world narrowed to effort and breath. The beam slid back into place with a groan. He fell to his knees, panting. She knelt beside him, brushing snow from his hair. "You could have been crushed." He looked up at her, eyes fierce but tender. "So could you." The fire flared again, illuminating their faces. 2 weathered souls, both scarred, both stubbornly alive. Outside, the wind began to ease. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine, smoke, and something new, something fragile and human, born in the heart of a storm. Martha's hand lingered against his cheek before she realized it. "You saved me again," she whispered. He caught her wrist gently. "Not yet," he said. Her breath caught at the quiet promise in his tone. The storm had broken, but another kind of tremor remained, softer, deeper. She withdrew her hand slowly, her eyes glistening. And as the wind finally stilled beyond the door, both of them knew the snow outside was not the only thing that had begun to melt. Morning returned pale and trembling, spilling light through the hole in the roof they had fought to save. The snow had crusted over, gleaming like glass, and the cabin felt smaller now. Warmer, too, though Martha couldn't tell if it was from the fire, or from what lingered between them since the storm. She woke to the soft scrape of a knife against wood. Tahu sat by the hearth, carving a new brace to replace the cracked beam. His shirt was torn at the shoulder where the timber had struck him, the skin beneath bruised dark violet. "You should rest," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "Rest makes the pain louder." She rose, wrapped herself in her shawl, and poured water from the kettle. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold but from the strange ache of care she hadn't felt in years. She brought the cup to him, but he kept working until she set it in front of him. "I'll finish this before sundown," he said. "The storm's past. It can wait." He shook his head. "Storms always return." The words held more weight than weather. She watched him work, steady, methodical, and thought how little she truly knew him. An Apache widower, a man carved from silence and smoke, who had given shelter to a stranger and buried her husband without expecting thanks. She wondered what ghosts he spoke to when he stared into the fire at night. He noticed her gaze. "You're afraid I'll send you away," he said. She startled. "No, well maybe. I know I can't stay forever." He set down the knife. "Why not?" The question hung there, impossible and vast. She wanted to answer with sense, with duty, reputation, all the reasons that made a woman respectable. But none of them felt real anymore. Out here, the town's voices were only wind against the mountain. She tried for a brittle smile. "Because people like me don't belong in places like this." Tahu's eyes softened. "Places don't care who belongs. Only people do." The quiet stretched between them again, full of unspoken things. She busied herself tidying the table, folding his few clothes, mending the tear at his sleeve. It felt almost wrong to touch something that belonged to him, yet he didn't stop her. By afternoon, sunlight poured through the patched roof, warming the room to a golden hush. The kettle hummed, the air smelled of pine resin and bread. Martha caught herself humming a hymn under her breath, one her mother used to sing. When she realized it, she flushed and stopped. "Keep singing," he said. "I forgot the words." "Then make new ones." She laughed softly. "You're not much for rules, are you?" "I had too many once," he said. "None brought peace." The tone in his voice turned her laughter to quiet thought. She wanted to ask about his wife, the child he'd lost, but she sensed it was a wound that belonged to the silence. So she said only, "You're a good man." His eyes flickered to the floor. "No. Just one still breathing." She stepped closer, lowering herself to sit near him. "Then maybe that's enough." For a time, neither spoke. The world outside was endless white, but inside the cabin, life felt suspended, like a heartbeat held between breaths. She found herself noticing small things. The way his hands were large but careful, how his words carried more truth than most men's sermons. She had spent years living beside a husband she admired yet never truly knew. Now she sat beside a stranger who spoke straight to the bone. Near dusk, movement in the distance caught her eye. Through the window, she saw 3 figures riding from the direction of town. Her heart clenched. "They're coming again." Tahu looked up. He didn't need to ask who. When the riders reached the cabin, the lead man dismounted. It was Sheriff Doolin again, coat flapping in the wind, eyes full of disapproval. "Mrs. Ellison," he called. "You best pack your things." The whole town stirred up. "Pastor claims you've lost your senses, staying out here with him." Tahu opened the door before she could answer. "She's safe here," he said evenly. The sheriff sneered. "That's not your say. Law's the law." "What law says warmth is a crime?" Martha demanded. "Decency," he snapped. "You're grieving, ma'am. You don't see how it looks." She stepped forward, trembling but unyielding. I see just fine. I see a man who buried my husband when no one else would lift a shovel. Doolin's gaze flicked to Tahu. You think folks'll forgive this? A white woman and an Apache under the same roof. Tahu's voice stayed calm. Forgiveness isn't mine to ask. Martha turned to him, eyes bright. Nor mine, she said, then faced the sheriff. Tell them I said so. Doolin's expression hardened. You'll regret this. Then I'll regret it warm, she replied. The men muttered curses and rode off into the dusk, snow kicking beneath their horses' hooves. The moment they vanished, Martha exhaled shakily and sank onto the step. Her legs felt weak, but her heart felt alive in a way it hadn't for years. Tahu watched her quietly. You didn't have to defend me. Yes, I did, she said. You didn't ask for any of this. He crouched beside her. Neither did you. The sky above them turned rose and gold, the storm clouds thinning to pale veils. The valley glittered with new snow, unbroken except for their footprints. She looked at him, the light catching in his white hair, and for the first time she didn't see the line between them. Race, grief, age, fear. She saw only another human, carved by loss into something resilient and kind. Will they come back? She asked. He nodded once. Maybe not with words next time. Her throat tightened. Then we should leave. He shook his head. Running changes nothing. I've done enough of that. What then? Stay until spring, he said quietly. After that, go where the snow doesn't find you. She almost smiled. You make it sound easy. It isn't. Inside, the fire popped softly. She rose, brushing snow from her skirt. If I stay, she said, I won't hide. I won't be your burden. He looked up at her, eyes dark with meaning. You'd be my reason. Her breath caught. The words were simple, but they struck something deep. She didn't answer, couldn't. The warmth that spread through her wasn't just gratitude or pity. It was recognition, the sudden knowledge that she had already begun to belong here, long before she admitted it to herself. She turned back toward the door. You should eat before the fire dies. He smiled faintly. You always speak of fire when you mean heart. Maybe I do. Night fell slow and tender. They shared stew in silence, the air between them thick with unspoken understanding. When she reached for the ladle, their hands brushed. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. Outside, the wind had softened to a whisper, carrying the distant cry of an owl. Inside, time slowed to the rhythm of the fire's breath. She felt the weight of every year she'd lived, every fear she'd carried, and how, somehow, they had all led her here, to this cabin this night, this man who asked for nothing but her presence. When the meal was done, he rose to add another log to the fire. The flames leapt higher, painting the room in gold and copper. Martha stood too, restless with the pulse of something new. She walked to the window, where the world outside shimmered endless and white. He joined her there, close enough that she felt his warmth. Tomorrow, he said softly, we fix the roof proper. She smiled faintly. And after that? He glanced at her, a rare tenderness in his gaze. After that, we see if spring remembers us. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. I thought my life ended on that road. Maybe it began again here, he said. She turned to face him. The firelight caught the silver strands of his hair, the lines carved by sorrow around his mouth. He looked like the earth itself, scarred but steadfast. And when he lifted his hand to brush the tear from her cheek, she didn't flinch. For the first time in her long, weathered life, Martha Ellison didn't feel like a widow, or a ghost, or a woman judged by others. She felt seen, entirely, wordlessly seen. The fire crackled once, sending sparks up the chimney. He drew back, not to retreat but to give her space to breathe. Outside, the snow began again, soft and quiet as the start of forgiveness. Martha looked out into it, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe I'll stay till spring. Tahu's answer came like the settling of peace itself. Spring's already here.